background's architecture, sort of architecture and cinema, so it kind of found a way to merge those two a little bit. And as a company, we focus on a little bit more of the sort of spectacular, big outdoor architecturally integrated projects. This one happened to be indoor, but same kind of DNA. We're really trying to push or merge the boundary, that's not the right way to say it, trying to merge the media and the architecture into the same kind of, make it more of a building material and less like a sign. So in this particular project, the client was interested in putting a sort of digital screen in the atrium of an existing building. It was, I think, originally Sony Pictures in Culver City, and a new owner was taking it over and redeveloping it for multi-tenant use. And so they had Gensler as the architect to come in and do a whole sort of TI improvement. And we initially talked to Gensler. They had this idea of just sort of putting a box in this big atrium. To give you some context, it's like a gigantic kind of triangular glass face that faces west. So they had this screen kind of sitting above some doors, and they had these kind of large steps so that as you come out of your office, they kind of terrace down, and you're able to sit on this sort of big public gathering space, informal gathering space in the thing. And so they had this idea to have a screen there just to play some interesting content, and that's kind of where we ended off. We were working with them in the early stages of design to come up with, if you did that rectangular box, what's the cost, all that kind of stuff. And then we proposed essentially a slightly different version to try and, because the space is massive. I don't know if you've seen the picture, but it's a very large, wide, glassy space. And so putting this kind of little like postage stamp thing in the middle just like didn't really seem like the best use of anyone's money and time and kind of getting some impact there. So we proposed some ways of, within the same like display area, like spreading them out so that the edges of the thing kind of broke apart and you had gaps in between, and the technology kind of extended to kind of like embrace the space a little bit more. And then it kind of went into hibernation. Like the client project did some other stuff. We weren't officially engaged. We were kind of just having early conversations, and it came back actually through the contractor. And so we were able to like revitalize that design, push it a little bit further, get a little bit better resolution than the year before when we talked about it. And so we ended up in kind of chunks doing everything from the design of the system to procuring materials, customizing them to get this very narrow sort of blade thing that would allow this kind of feathering to happen. Installed it, worked with the structural engineers and their AV systems guys to integrate the audio, and then are now managing the content so that we have an agreement with them. We have a sort of dynamic monthly schedule that can change and do, it's all non-commercial video art essentially. Some of it's stuff that we created in-house, some of it's licensed artists that we work with. And then anytime they have special people visiting or want to do some branding or have like an event, then we'll do sort of custom graphics for them for their event. I led the design team that basically is the design and sort of project management team. Within that, I would say we have our sort of vice president of products who's dealing with the customizations that we needed to do. There's a center portion of it, which we kind of call like the hero screen, which is roughly like 16:9, so it's pretty friendly for swapping in stuff. They talked about wanting to, like a lot of people, they didn't exactly know what they wanted to do with it. They just wanted like something big and impactful and cool. But that in the mornings, they're like, oh, well, maybe we'll do like CNN, or be able to play, like at the time I think it was like World Cup was happening, so it was like we want to be able to do stuff like that, integrate with TV, live broadcast things. But then other than that, doesn't happen that often. If they didn't want to just put CNN up all day. So we worked within our design team. We have myself, architectural background, and some other architect trained designers. Our VP of products is essentially a mechanical engineer. And then our content team, all sort of within that design content department. So I head that up, but then obviously there's tons of other people that are super important in that role. And now, as like an ongoing thing, it's really our content department that's managing and coordinating with them on a daily, weekly basis of whatever they have going on, whatever they might need in terms of custom work. each month, I would say, we developed a series of proposals for like, here's like the kind of different storylines that we could see, activating this thing. It's been up for half a year, I think. And in that time, the content has mostly focused on like LA specific work. So we do a lot of work with Chris Pritchard is a video artist who does a lot of time lapse stuff. So he'll set up cameras like overlooking Los Angeles or various other places, and just like you get this like it's a time lapse. Everyone's seen that, but like they're amazing, and you can get a really high resolution because he's like making those specifically for these purposes. So it's focused on that. There's a couple other pieces, I can't remember the names because I wasn't doing the active management on that side, but I'm happy to share them afterwards. Of video artists, like one of my favorites was I think it was this piece called Big, where they would take shots of Los Angeles and then composite in people that like sort of giant scale, like Godzilla size people, but lately weren't doing anything menacing. They're just kind of like sitting around or like playing with this. They're like there was one in the LA River. This is like, I don't know if you've been to LA, but it's not really a river. It's like a big concrete embankment. They shoot a lot of like car chase scenes and stuff in there. And so there was one of just like, there's like a guy like skateboarding on that, but he's 300 feet tall or something. So it's things like that have tended to be like that. There's LA specific, and then kind of nature LA, city, urban, that's been the most of the storylines, in addition to any specific things that they have. Like obviously there's some One Culver branding for the project, and then the tenants in the project are like, there's Equinox and a few other like content studios. So we're working through now like how they could integrate into their workflow in a way that they feel like is something that they could present, like using the screen as kind of like tests, or just getting a little bit more like a sense of community within the place of like, here's what we're working on, hey everybody, isn't this cool, kind of a thing. So there is some of that going on. It's like just starting to kind of ramp up now that they're like really filling the building out with tenants. Our content, I think it's a lot, the content specifically is probably a lot of really high resolution, like drone stuff and nature stuff. That is what we make. We also do a lot of licensing with other video artists, like the time lapse and the other stuff like that. And one of the cooler things that the content department does is we'll work with people that maybe weren't video artists specifically, but have some we've met through various other avenues, and they're interested in doing a video project. Like it wasn't on this particular project, but another one downtown LA. We worked with Alexa Mead, who does this really cool, primarily still work. Well, she'll like take a picture. She'll basically have a scene. Everyone's painted, like physical, like paint on people, paint on walls, whatever. But it looks sort of like an oil painting, and she'll take pictures of that. And so it's this kind of blurring of like reality and still life thing. But she'd never done a video piece before, so we worked with her to help produce and conceive of, to an extent, a piece where there was these two guys, I can't remember their names, but they're like fantastic dancers. So she painted them all up, and they're in this one room doing this like really cool dance scene. And so we kind of blur the lines a little bit between like fully producing stuff in-house versus all the way towards just finding things and licensing things that we really like. So there's this kind of middle ground of working with artists and like collaborating and producing pieces, but it's sort of primarily their vision, and we're kind of coming in and supporting that with technical expertise and cameras and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, well, I mean, going into it, when you're first looking at it before you've like gone through engineering and all that, you're just trying to like make a cool screen that kind of fits in this area. Again, I mentioned like the size that they were looking at was so small in comparison to the like volume of the space, and there's just so much light in there. It's just kind of like putting this little black box that even if it's on and like has amazing content, it's just like dwarfed by the scale of the space. So the first thing from a design perspective we're really trying to do is like, how do we expand this and to create a little bit more interest, a little bit more like just volume of the media itself. And so for us, and we've done this kind of approach on several projects where, you try to protect an area that they can help. I mean, monetize isn't really the right word in this project sense because they're not selling advertising, but like a sort of, again, hero image, like something that's very obviously like flexible for, changing out, doing presentations, kind of obvious 16:9 format. And then once you're outside, once you have that kind of covered, then we really just try and like blow apart the edges of the screen. So it's like blurring between what is media, what is screen, and what is building. I think as a kind of overarching aesthetic, that's one of the things that's really interesting to me about StandardVision, is that there's this exploration of like media and light as a building material as opposed to just technology that you're sticking somewhere. And so that was definitely evident on this project, where again the edges, you sort of from the edge of that like rectangular section, we start gapping display. So once you're outside of that box, there's it starts with maybe an inch, and then there's a 4-inch display module that's 20 feet tall roughly, and then it goes kind of 1.5 inch gap. So you're able to like essentially stick your hand through the thing. And the nice thing about it in that space, obviously it gets it bigger. You can increase the area without like sort of necessarily increasing cost, because you have the physical air gap, so you don't have to pay for that technology, which is marginal something. But then it was also this interplay of like letting light pass through the thing versus it not just feeling like this big heavy box. So you still get the main area, but then it sort of breaks apart, and it gets like you get light from the background, and I think it just kind of creates a more interesting experience overall, which is obviously what everyone's trying to do. I have a tendency, and I think a lot of our design team has a tendency to just kind of like, here's the problem in front of you, sort of like put your head down and like like work through all the cool ways that you can work, figure out how to solve this problem. But DSE and other things like it, it's helpful to kind of re-engage with everyone else that's also doing very cool stuff. We're like, oh right, there's like, it's not just us like in working in our little bubbles, working on these different projects. I think that's probably the biggest thing, is just sort of getting back out, and like the award show tonight, or just like see like everyone else's really cool project, or like kind of pushes you a little bit further to like, there's we're not the only ones out there. You make sure you're keeping track of what everyone else is doing, and making sure you're not just repeating the same thing over and over again. Which works for some people, I'm sure. That like it's probably easier to make money that way, just like keep repeating the same thing. But we tend to try and come up with new stuff each time. So that's why I think one of the cool things is like new technology, and then just new concepts, new ways that people are approaching media and architecture and content.